What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Jesus Christ. All right, we're going to reset that. Fuck. All right.
B
Hey,
roll.
everybody. Yeah, B-roll. There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Materia Junction podcast. And this is our side quest edition. I think that's what we kind of settled on the name before shooting it. This isn't necessarily attached to each episode that we've been doing, but it's more kind of an editorial video, if you will, of topics or things that we want to be able to kind of discuss and come across with Final Fantasy. And we thought no better place to start this series than with Final Fantasy X. Dad, man, it's been 25 years, my friend. 25 years this month of Final Fantasy X. And I mean, we got a lot to be able to talk about, but right off the surface, man, I just want to ask you, like, what are your first initial thoughts when someone asks you what is your impressions of Final Fantasy X? Like, what are you going to tell them?
Oof. That's such a that's such a like. There's so many layers to an answer for that question. But if I had to choose one thing, I would just say the story. I think the story is just close to perfect. To be honest.
Yeah, for me, it's the. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the story, but it's the characters. Specifically Yuna for me.
Yeah.
And we'll dive on that when we kind of talk into our talking points. But Final Fantasy X, man, it's just so special. In my personal opinion, I think it's the game that really made Final Fantasy a mainstream household name. And I also think it's the game that personally, I don't think we'd have the success that Sony has had with the PlayStation if it hadn't been for Final Fantasy X, releasing on the PlayStation 2 and how it just kind of ushered in a whole new generation of RPG games for us and what we expect from everything from character development to storylines and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, we could talk for days about Final Fantasy X, but there were a few just like kind of talking points I wanted to kind of hit when we kind of went through this, and it was things that just over you and I have never really had this discussion. We've talked about Final Fantasy X here and there, but we've never really did a deep dive into it. And if in case it needs to be said, I'm sure we're going to have spoilers in this. We're not going to
Mhm.
intentionally spoil anything, but we're also not going to intentionally not talk about the game. But it's been 25 years, so
Yeah.
unless if you're our buddy Dave, you've probably played this game and you know all the spoilers. Dave, Aerith dies in this game. A little bit of an inside joke, but if you watch last episode, episode 3, you'll get that. So, um, but man, I don't know if we can talk about Final Fantasy X without starting with the music of Final Fantasy X. So, I want to start out. I'm going to tell you some of my thoughts about the music in Final Fantasy X, and I want to be able to hear your thoughts and you to kind of dive into it a little bit more. So, for me with Final Fantasy X, I was thinking about this today. I don't think it is the best soundtrack or score of any Final Fantasy game. I don't think it's the best. I would still probably give that to Final Fantasy VII, but I have a
Mm,
couple of reasons for that. With that being said, I do think that Xanarkin is
yeah.
the absolute best piece of Final Fantasy music. Hell, I might even say best piece of video game music I've ever heard. And what makes that song so special is the game starts out and you start out and you're Tidus and you're kind of walking up on the hill and you're like, this is our story, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And it's playing that song and you see the ruins of Xanarkin. And the song in that moment without any context is so good. But when you get to the point in the game,
Hmm.
it just the music is second to none in my opinion. And I would probably put, you and I just finished up Final Fantasy 6, and we'll talk about that in a future episode. I'd
Yeah.
probably put the music from Final Fantasy 6 up there as well, as far as like some of the best music in Final Fantasy
Hmm.
games. But again, I don't think there's anything there that matches Xanarkin. Now, the reason why I don't know if I would say that Final Fantasy 10 has the best music of all is because I was also thinking about this today. Yuna's theme I love. I think Yuna's theme is absolutely amazing, but I don't know if I could pick out of a lineup anyone else's theme.
Right.
Where with Final Fantasy VII, you instantly know Aerith's,
Yeah.
Tifa, you know
Yeah.
Cloud. There is not a single person who's a Final Fantasy. For my own 5-year-old son knows One Wing Angel.
Right.
Like that's why I don't know if I put it up there at the very top. But man, it's so special. It's so special, and I think that what makes it unique, and I'll pass it over to you, is the fact that you have some beautiful scores like Xanarkin and Eunice theme, the Hymn of the Faith, the
Hmm.
Sending, but then you also have it paralleled with Outer Worlds, the beginning of the game
Yeah.
where it's that rock anthem
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
baseball. And I remember, like, I was like 13 or 14 when this game came out, and I was like, "Holy shit!" Like that was I was in my rock phase, right, as a young
Hmm.
teenager, and it just blew me away. It really did. And so even then, at that young age, like I realized how special this music was. So, why don't you dive in a little bit there, man? What do you feel about the music in Final Fantasy X?
Well, I definitely agree with you that I think like if you were to take a single track, just one track from all of the compilation of music, I think To Xanarkin would have to be up there. It is just such a recognizable song, and there's a lot of weight to it because like the first time, like you said, the first time you hear that song is right as the credits roll in the beginning, but there's no context to what's going on.
Yeah,
And then after your basically your entire journey and you find out what's going on and then you hear it and you're like, whoa, like this is very heavy. But yeah, I do personally enjoy the soundtrack for 10. I think there's a lot of really good songs on there. But I agree. I wouldn't rank it like very very high. Like I wouldn't rank it higher than I think 8 is, and I'm probably biased, but I think 8 has the best music of all any Final Fantasy game, and I
eight
have to
is
put
really good.
yeah, and I have to put 6 right underneath. 6, I haven't been able to get Final Fantasy 6 music out of my head. It's just stuck in there. So I'd have to say that, but 10's really good, but like there's individual tracks. Like I love 10's battle theme. I love
Yeah.
the fanfare, like the victory fanfare for 10. And yeah, that heavy metal track, just like you start off the game with that, and you're just like, whoa, like it's a little jarring, like to hear such a heavy song, but then at the end, when you're fighting Jecht and he's in that final Aeon form and it's playing in the background, you're like, yeah, this is pretty badass. So I totally get it. That's more like Jecht's theme than anything. You don't know that until the end of the game, but um, yeah, I mean, it still hits. Like To Xanarkin is probably the single most recognizable just one song. Like if I had to convince somebody to enjoy Final Fantasy off of the music and I had one song to hit them with, I'd probably hit them with that song.
I tend to try to post stuff on my social media that um I love playing the devil's advocate. I love, the other side of the argument, even if I don't believe it. I don't know. Maybe you can say I gaslight. Maybe I don't know. I just enjoy bickering and arguing. But I truly meant it when I posted it. I posted just a text with Xanakin playing in the background, and I just said, hands down, without any argument, this is the best track of any Final Fantasy game of all time. Prove me wrong. And overwhelmingly, the amount of people who commented that in agreement that it
Yeah.
is the best overall song. When you're just talking about one piece of music,
Hmm.
it is the absolute best piece of music. And again, I think that it's hard to score a game, right? It's hard to make music for a game, um but especially when Nebu Imatsu, right? I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name right. He's done, he's influenced every Final Fantasy game, since the start. And to be at this point going through 10 mainline Final Fantasy games, not including spin-offs and things like that, to still have such a unique pulse onto each game and each story, and how he beautifully scores every game. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, man. I think if I had to truly rank it, and I reserve the right to change my mind, I'm probably putting 8 second behind 7. I mean, 7. I'm biased too. 7's my favorite,
Yeah.
right? But
That's fair.
8 has a beautiful it has beautiful music to it. 6, again, we just talked about 6. 9, I wasn't a fan of 9, the game, but the music was incredible in it.
9 has
So
really great music, yeah.
yeah. So I listen. I just think that for me, anyways, if there's if you had to wipe away any music from all Final Fantasy games, you had to keep one. I'm keeping Xanarkin, and for that reason, I just feel like that's the first place you got to talk about is
Mhm.
music. I feel like it's so fitting, especially with. And again, I was thinking this preparing for this episode, the side quest. I was thinking about like what makes the music so special? And there's clearly like an aquatic theme to Final Fantasy X, right? Like everywhere
Yes.
you go, there's water somewhere. And I feel like in a way the music matches a very aquatic, like village-y type vibe to it, if that makes sense. Like you think of like when you're in oh, whatever the town is, I don't remember the name of it, where Yuna does the sending at. Even the music walking through Kilika, I think was the name of the town. Well,
Yeah, Kilika. Yeah.
Even walking through there, like just the music of walking through was sad and depressing, but still
Yeah.
had the same kind of vibe as like for somehow how you match that up with like Outer Worlds and the rock anthem at the very beginning or Jet's theme at the very end when you're fighting him. I don't know. To me, it's very special. I think the music in Final Fantasy X
Yeah.
is absolutely amazing. But going into our next point, man, the characters I had mentioned about Yuna's theme, and I want to dive into
Yeah.
Yuna here in a second, but I'd love to open it up to you first. When you're looking at cast of characters for this game, what makes the characters in this game so special or stand out to you?
Well, I mean, for me, so I'll preface what I'm about to say by saying this. To this day, it's a little closer now, but to this day, I still think Final Fantasy X is the best Final Fantasy game ever made. It is not my favorite. My favorite is 8, but I could, subjectively look at the franchise as a whole and say that 10 is a better game than 8. And I still think it is the best Final Fantasy game of all time. There's a lot of different implications. It's the first voice acted game. It's the first full 3D, Final Fantasy game. The PS2. There's so much that went right for Final Fantasy X. But for me, what makes it special is the characters and the story. And I really enjoy um, any type of story or video game or movie where you obviously have your protagonist, your main character, which is Tidus, but I feel like the stronger the supporting cast is around the main character, the better the story is. Like you could say the same thing about, we're both huge Batman fans, right? Batman is only as good as his villains. Like his
Yeah.
villains are so much more interesting than Batman as a character, but they make him who he is. Like they help flesh him out because it's like the opposite, the same side of the opposite coin or whatever. And I feel like Final Fantasy X does a really, really good job of saying, here's Tidus. You're going to play as him for the majority of the game, but we're going to show you why everybody else around him is very, very important. And I think Yuna is the perfect example of that because halfway through the story, you're like, oh, Tidus is just going along for the ride. He's not the main character here. This is
Yeah.
Yuna's story, and you're just playing through Tidus's perspective, which I like when games do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like when you're talking about an overall cast of characters, um, it's funny because if if this was a movie and we were giving away Oscars, I think Final Fantasy X hands down would win an Oscar for best supporting cast, right? But I don't know if it would win an Oscar for best male lead. I even to this day find Tidus so fucking annoying. And I
Mm-hmm.
love this game. I do, right? Um and I have grown to appreciate the Tidus character more and more. But I do wish, like, if a world ever comes where they remake this game, I hope they really do take a little bit of a personality shift with Tidus and kind of change him a little bit. He was a little bit too anime, whiny, bratty type vibes to me. I didn't really care for it, right? But that being said, he was still a great, great lead for the game. But I agree with you. This wasn't his story. This was Yuna's story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get to Yuna here in just a half second. But you have Waka, you have Lulu, you have Kamari, you have Riku, you have Arin. But then you even talk about going further with like your villains, with Jet
Mm-hmm.
and Maester Seymour and all the Guados and the Outbeds and things like that. There were so many different layers of complexity with every character, and I think they did a really good job of being able to flush out kind of the culture that this world was
Mm-hmm.
setting up with all these characters, right? Um, but that leads me to Yuna herself, and I think I've decided from every Final, and I haven't played all Final Fantasy games. You guys, as you've seen or know, if you watched us before, we're working our way through every mainline Final Fantasy game. So I can only speak for the games that I've played so far. But out of the games I've played so far, I think Yuna is my favorite character of any Final Fantasy game, and there's a couple of reasons why. One, because I can relate to her story on the religious
Mhm.
aspect, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But two, she I think had such an amazing character development from where she started out in Besaid, coming out of the temple, and she was always apologetic for everything she did.
Right.
Everything she did in her life was for the service of other people. And there's something just absolutely amazing about someone who sacrifices everything they have to be able to I mean, quite frankly, save the world, right? Um, and to see the heartbreak in her at the very end of the game. This is what makes it so fucking special to me is that in a world where everyone's celebrating because sin is defeated and the entire world is joyous, there's only two people unhappy. It's Yuna and Titus. And
Mhm.
to see a world that's celebrating the destruction of sin and then to see her devastation because all she wants is another moment with Titus. It
Mhm.
just to me, like how often do we do that? Like you and I talk a lot about being fathers, right? How often do we give up everything we want for the betterment of our family? Like
Yeah.
she lived her path, which I understand why they wanted to do what they did in Final Fantasy X too. They just didn't execute it very well, right? I got that
Mhm.
she was like, no, okay, I'm going to do this for me now. I
Yeah.
just didn't think for me was going to be a K-pop singer,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
traveling the world or whatever. It was like, Tidus is alive. I've got to go save him. But first, let me be Taylor Swift and Spira, right? I just didn't get it. So, um, but for Yuna, I just think that it all sums up her personality in one scene, and that's the sending scene in Kilika,
Yeah.
where everyone's devastated. All their loved ones have passed, and she steps into her role as a summoner, to do what she needed to do for the people of Spira. And it just, I don't know, man. There's something about her I just absolutely love. It's funny though because I talk about Final Fantasy a lot with my wife because other than you, Dad, man, I don't have anybody else I can really talk Final Fantasy about. So my
Right.
wife's
Right.
never played the games, but she knows the storylines. She doesn't really care for Yuna or
Yeah.
anyone from Final Fantasy X. But I think even then she can appreciate the heart that Yuna has. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard for me to put into words, but I just absolutely love the Yuna character. So
Yeah.
um, let me ask you this though in Final Fantasy X, when we're talking about villains,
Mhm.
you and I obviously we have a great debate coming at some point between
Oh yeah.
villains and Final Fantasy.
Mhm.
Where do you rate Maester Seymour on your list? You don't have to necessarily put him on there, but like just give me some thoughts. What you think about Maester Seymour? Did the villain
So
for you in 10?
so it's funny because yeah, Maester Seymour is a villain in the game, right? But to me, it's like I've gotten so deep in the analysis of this game that Maester Seymour is not the main villain to me in this
Yeah,
game, right?
I'd agree.
He definitely passes the creepy, like, you know you love to hate him type of, like, like he's icky, right? Like he's gross, and the fact that he's creeping on a 17-year-old girl is just makes it, just war. It's just like bleh,
Yeah,
and the interactions he has with Titus, like Titus is like the jealous, oh, he's talking to my girl stuff. It's relatable, right? But
yeah,
I look at Seymour, and his even his backstory is tragic, but I just look at him as like a pawn as part of the major scheme. But I mean, he does it, like, he gets there for me. He is a thorn in the side of the party the entire game. I can't think of another Final Fantasy game where you fight the same friggin' boss so many friggin' times. You
yeah,
fight him once when he's just a regular dude, and then he becomes this other. You fight him like 4 or 5 times. Like, that's kind of crazy to me, but yeah, I mean, he definitely fits that whole like icky villain role. But like I said, I think he's just like a minor cog in that wheel. But the overall premise of the villainy in Final Fantasy X is very controversial, of course, but I love when you can reflect real life questions into what you're consuming as far as your media. So yeah, I think the villain of Final Fantasy X, they nail. It's a 10 out of 10 for me. It's spoiler alert. Final Fantasy X is the greatest Final Fantasy villain of all time. Whatever you want to name it, Final Fantasy X has the best Final Fantasy villain of all time.
That's crazy.
it, it
That's
it
insane.
it
All right,
it
okay,
does.
so I let's, because we're talking about Final Fantasy X. Let's open up that door just a hair. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're talking about Unalesca, right?
No, I'm actually talking about the religion of Yevon as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously led and manipulated by Unalesca,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So and that will kind of dive into our last topic here in a second, but I want to talk about briefly about Unalesca, because I this game does it as best as any Final Fantasy game has done it, but it's a trope that Final Fantasy does that drives me absolutely insane. And that is, the villain we know of throughout 80% of the game is not the villain we're supposed to be supposed to be that's not the villain that we're supposed to actually be, the one that is the one that we ultimately fight at the end of it. And to me, that kind of thing just, I don't know, it drives me crazy a little bit, in large part because I I love the fact that it always looks for kind of a turn or twist and things like that for who our villains are going to be. But I also kind of feel like sometimes it's wasted. I think of like Final Fantasy 9, spoilers for that. Kuja, I think if I pronounce his name, is not the ultimate villain at the end of the game, and I don't know. To me, sometimes that falls just a little bit short. Yeah, so with that in mind, like, in regards to the extra layer of villainry, if that's a word, with Final Fantasy X, you're talking about, um even the perspective of like the Albed are supposed to be villains, and the people of Guado are supposed to be villains. You have Maester Seymour, who, um I agree with you. It's a little cringy and creepy.
Yeah.
The love triangle there with him, Titus, and Yuna, and then you got Unalesca at the end, who, by the way, whoever did the character design for Unalesca, you were a deprived individual, because you were so thirsty. Like, I don't know how we
Yeah.
ended up with
That
micro
was
Unalesca. It was like, here's our
yeah.
religious icon wearing absolutely nothing. But you had mentioned the religious aspect of it and the faith. Um, there's so many things going on with the villains in this game.
Yeah.
How do you feel with the story? Did it flush everything out? Like, diving into our last talking point here, the story of the game. Did Final Fantasy X do a good job of fitting everything they wanted to fit into that 50-hour gameplay, or did we find ourselves falling short? Because you got to admit, there's a lot of times that Final Fantasy will give us a whole bunch more questions at the end than
Yeah.
answers. Where does 10 stack up to you for that?
So I think it's there's two different aspects of it, right? I feel like the game wants you to believe that Seymour is the main villain. And I want to say for like 80% of the game, that's actually what happens, right? But then once you get to Xanarkand and Unalesca tells you the story of Yevon and Lord Zayon and the final summoning and all this, it's just kind of like, well, whoa, here's the big twist. It's really just this false sense of faith that everybody has been, you know, raised to believe in, and it's to me, it's the betrayal of the ideal that you're worshiping this entity that's supposed to bring you peace and salvation, and that's what's causing it. It's just like, to me, it was just, at the time I was in Catholic school, and it just synonymously related to what I was learning in school, and I always had questions, because a lot of the stuff that I was taught in growing up in Catholic schools just didn't make sense to me, right? So I
Yeah.
was always asking questions, and then now I'm here playing this game, and it's just like, whoa, maybe this whole idea of this structure is not all it's cracked out to be, and I just thought that was so fascinating. So to me, looking at that level, I thought the execution, like I think it ended properly. I wanted a little bit more though, because I feel like once you get to Unalesca, it's just like a lot of exposition, and then she's just kind of telling you what's going on. Like, oh, here's ABC. This is the MacGuffin. You got to go get it and figure this out. And then there's no real like. They don't even know what they're gonna do. Like Tidus is just like, I'll figure something out. Like, how are you gonna figure something out? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, like, what do you mean
You've been
you're
here
gonna
four
figure it out?
days, my man.
Yeah, like you're not even real, bro. Like, what are you talking about? So I think the execution at the end was great. I would have loved a little bit more after Unalesca just to kind of like catch up, because uh, chronologically in the game, after you beat Unalesca, you can go right away and fight Sin.
Yeah.
So if you're focusing on just the linearity of it, you go right to the end and you beat the game right there. Uh, you get the airship and you can travel a little bit and explore more of the lore of Spira and get the extra aeons and all this other stuff, and then you find out everybody else's backstory, sure, but that's all optional stuff. So I think it's like 50-50. I think the execution at the very, very end was satisfying because there was a resolution, but I wanted a little bit more. Like I didn't want to be told the story. I wanted the story to unravel in front of me in real time, and I would have appreciated it a little bit more if they ever do a remake. They could maybe flesh that out a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I think all in all, it was still solid the way it was executed. Yeah.
I think that when I look back and listen, I'm not a writer, I'm not a game developer, so trust me, I'm sure if they did what I would suggest, it would be trash. But I couldn't help but to think when I was thinking about any gaps in the story or loose ends that they could have maybe kind of tied up. I agree with you with Unalesca, and I think that what would have helped that is I think having a subplot storyline with Aaron and Unalesca. Because Aaron, I mean, Aaron hates Unalesca. And to me, I've always imagined that Aaron knew everything that was going to happen, like like a prophet,
Hmm.
like he knew what was ultimately going to be. And I think the story would have hit a little bit more if Aaron would have been the one saying, "Hey, I know how this ends." Um, but we can rewrite our own ending here, and his the battle leading up to Unalaska been a little bit more heavy on him and a little bit more personal with him, I guess, if you will, as opposed to like you said, like Tita's being like, "No, we'll figure this out," like we got this, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
because I can appreciate his love for Yuna, like I appreciate all of that, right? But to me, I just kind of felt in that moment this is grown-up shit. This should have been Aaron saying no, like this isn't the way it has to be. Like I've lived my life, I've seen this through, that we are going to change this. And so I think that would have helped a little bit too. But ultimately, I think that the storyline of Final Fantasy X, if any Final Fantasy game, is the easiest to follow. If you've never played a Final
Yeah.
Fantasy game, you can play this from start to end, and I don't think any of the Final Fantasy lore gets lost on you, right? Like I think they do a really good job of with the Aeons and how like because most Final Fantasy games, obviously you're gonna get the whatever they want to call them, whether they're icons, Aeons, GS, whatever. Um, and you're gonna get them equipped to a certain character. I love the fact that it was all on Yuna. That just made sense as she went through her
Hmm.
pilgrimage and collecting the Aeons, and it made sense that she would need them to defeat Sin. And listen, I'll be 100% honest. I've beaten this game 2 times now. Both times it was because I had Yojimbo. Yojimbo was the MVP for me.
Yeah,
A great,
he's pretty good.
yeah. Like I don't know if I would have beat a Jet either time if I'm being honest. So but I think the storyline is really really good. I think I agree with you. It's the best Final Fantasy game. It's not my favorite, but it is. I think just when you look at the game as a whole, the characters, the
Hmm.
music, the storyline, the
Yeah.
gameplay, the mechanics, shit. We didn't even talk about the turn based combat in this game. It's the best combat of any RPG game ever, and I
Yeah.
can confidently say that knowing that I have not played every RPG game ever, but this combat is amazing, and there's no doubt in my mind that games like Expedition 33 were heavily influenced by this combat, right?
Oh yeah.
So I think Final Fantasy X is a great game, but aside from the game itself, Dad, man, this is really why I want to have this conversation. This game has some really deep personal feelings for me, right? So similar to you, like I grew up in a Christian school. I grew up in I went to a Southern Baptist Christian academy,
Mhm.
and I remember around the time this game came out and playing through it, the idea of questioning your faith, like that was not something you did, right? And
Mhm.
for me, I remember thinking of the idea of like you can actually push back, like you like this may not be exactly what it's meant to be. Um, and that one idea planted in my head honestly led 30, 25 years later to how I kind of see my own spiritual and religious beliefs, right? And
Mhm.
I remember I was sitting in church, and this is listen, my viewpoint and Dadman's viewpoint is no more significant or less significant than yours. If the religious aspect of this game didn't mean anything to you, there's nothing wrong with that either, right? But I'm gonna talk to you, like, for those of you who are listening to this, I wanna just be honest. I'm gonna share with you my experiences, and um, I guess if you don't like it, you can kick rocks. I don't know. I don't want you to be upset if you're listening to this, but for me, I have a underlying spiritual belief, and I have a faith. And this game really kind of helps me define that as an adult, because my beliefs right now is very much more of a relationship with God versus a religion with Him. And I think that
Mhm.
this game hits those topics so well. The church in this game is very representative of the Southern Baptist church that I grew up in, and the fact that we just believe what we believe because it's what we always
Mhm.
believed, and how
Right.
dare you say otherwise.
Right.
And so the idea of challenging that, pushing back on it, and then finding out that your church has been up to some really corrupt, bad, sinful shit is like I first of all, I gotta imagine a lot of religions are this way, but for me, man, growing up, the church I grew up in covered up so many sexual assaults in the church. For what? Like,
Mhm.
to make sure that the elders of the church were protected. They were the ones fucking doing it, and like
Mhm.
as an adult now, I'm like, why would I ever subject, like, if I had known then, like what I knew now, or like the idea of sending my kids to church sometimes is hard because of what I've experienced, because I don't I've lost trust in it, right?
Mhm.
And I think that this game does a good job of saying, one, that's okay. It's okay. It's okay to lose trust in it. It's okay to force them to earn your trust, and to really kind of define what you believe. But two, it just shows the importance of having your own individual spirituality with your God, and how important that is to have that relationship with God versus that religion with them. Because religion's going to fail. Like, people can't tell you what your relationship is with God.
Mhm.
So for me, that has defined how I view religion and my spiritual beliefs at 39 years old. Um, with all that being said, I've got to admit that if there's one hymn in my life that I probably know better than any other ones, it's the hymn of the faith from Final Fantasy X over any other hymn that I sung when I was in church. Like, it's just a beautiful song.
Mhm.
But again, like for me, it Final Fantasy points a mirror at the world, and it really helps to call out some of the hypocrisy that we have as a society. And I thought this game did a really great job of that. I really did. And so, as a almost 40-year-old man now, 25 years later, let me just say thank you to Square for making this game. Thank you to the developers, and thank you for calling out something that needed to be called out within the realm of religion. So, Dad, man, that's my soapbox for a half second. Open up. How do you feel about this game? What makes it so special to you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar I have a similar approach as you. Like I grew up Catholic. I was in Catholic school from, the majority of my life. And you know, I grew up fast. I had two younger sisters. My mom was a single mom for a while before she met my stepdad. So, I had to kind of mature a little bit, let's say. And in maturing, I always asked questions. Like I always just like, well, why is that? Well,
Yeah.
why does it have to be that way? And then I never accepted the answer that that's just the way things are. Like that to me, like if you can't explain why something is, then I should question it, right? And I probably you know didn't fit in my Catholic schools as I got later on in like fifth and sixth grade, and finally in seventh and eighth I went to public school and it was great. But playing Final Fantasy X, like that's why like Tidus, yeah, he's a very annoying character, but he comes from the outside perspective where he's not very religious, right? Like he's the outsider here, and he comes from Xanarkin, which is a very technologically advanced civilization, and the prayer that they do is the Xanarkin symbol of Blitzball victory. And for the people of Spira and Yevon, that is their praying to their god. So it's like there's such a huge disconnect there. And Tidus comes in asking all the questions. Well, why? And I think his whole purpose as a character is to instill that sense of doubt in Yuna, because she has grown up in the faith,
Mhm.
right? Her father was a summoner, and she grew up in the temples, and so she knows only one way. And then until she starts listening to what Tidus is saying, and everything gets unraveled, she starts questioning it too. And then even Waka, who's like the most intense religious fanatic in the entire party, even he starts questioning it. And it's just like, I like when stories like that can pull at the heartstrings of real life situations, because I'm sure there's thousands of people out there who have grown up in religious families or religious upbringings, and sometimes they feel blasphemous because they're asking, well, why is it this way, and why can't it be in any other way? Like, why does it have to be one way? Why can't it be multiple ways? So I just appreciated that, and that really resonated with me. And like the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church as mirroring the hypocrisy of Yevon as a belief system. It's just, there's so many different layers you can peel back. You could do an entire like series on the complexity of the faith that the people of Spira have in their beliefs. But at the end of the day, my belief, whether it's in real life or playing this game, my belief is in people, is in the people who can do good, right? Like the good in people, the good in humanity. Like that's where my belief lies. And I think at the end of the game, that's what happens. Yuna does this final conquering of sin. They get the eternal calm, and she becomes like this beacon of hope for Spira. And she just kind of says it like, we just have to treat each other better. And and it's so crazy, like that's being said in a game that was made in 2001, right before 9/11, and then you're playing this game 25 years later and you're like, holy shit, like that still resonates today. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you believe in. Your moral obligation, your sole responsibility as a human being is to do what's good and do the right thing. And I think that is what makes that game so special to me.
No kidding. And speaking of that, we haven't even mentioned the underlying racism story that this tells between the Outbed and the Yevon and things like that. And I mean, just so perfectly timed. I think when this game was released, and so there's so much more we can dive into. Listen, I'm sure we will dive into this game a lot more at some point down the road, because we only scratched the absolute surface of
Yeah.
this game. So um, at the end of the day, happy birthday to Final Fantasy X. 25 years old, I think, as of July 19th. So you're 8 years too old for Maester Seymour, but you were the perfect age for a couple of Final Fantasy nuts like us. So um but
That was a good
thank you
one.
guys for joining us along this ride. Drop in the comments below. Make sure to keep the conversation going. Love to be able to hear your thoughts about Final Fantasy X. Do you think it's the greatest Final Fantasy game of all time? where does it fall on your list? And absolutely, just let us know. Make sure to like and subscribe and share and all that kind of stuff, because we're trying to grow our party, trying to grow this community, and we appreciate your help along the way. So that's it, man. We've met our save Moogle. We're gonna sign off here, and we'll catch you guys again on episode 4. That's going to be coming up only like a day or two after we air this one. So we got a good one here for you guys. So thank you guys for joining us. Bye, guys.